If I'm not, I don't.
Would you play in it?
You get fined if you're supposed to be in it and you're not hurt and you decide not to play. That's a hefty fine. So hell yeah, I would play in it.
There you go. Today, the league released the first round of All-Star voting results. Out east, KD, Giannis, and Embiid lead all front court players. Beal, Kyrie, and Harden lead all backcourt players in that order. And in the West, LeBron, Jokic, and Kawhi leading the way for the front court. Steph, Luka, and Dame, the top three in that order among the West guards. All right, we will get back to the rosters and the voting and all of that in a minute. But with that, it is time for another edition of Where in the World is Brian Windhorst? That is a very severe-looking photo, Brian. Where are you coming to us from?
The home of the finest lemon pepper wings in the NBA, Rachel, Atlanta, Georgia, and the home of the soon-to-be-announced March 7th All-Star Game. Now, look, I know, and certainly De'Aaron Fox articulated this, this seems like a risk and something that may be borderline. But I'm going to tell you that in talking to teams out there, they're more worried about the guys who don't go to the All-Star game than the guys who do come here to Atlanta, because those guys are going to be going to Mexico, maybe to other beach destinations where they may not be as secure as the folks who are here going to be in Atlanta for this. And look, I know that this is a risk, but it's a television product and it's a money thing, and there might even be something along the lines of a slam dunk contest and a three-point contest. Not the traditional All-Star Saturday night, but we may see some ancillary things as well when it gets announced, likely in the next few hours.
And I agree with Brian, too. Obviously, when the NBA wants to do something, they get it done. And I can guarantee without even going or knowing, these guys are going to be on lockdown. It's going to be really strict. So it may not be possibly as fun as an All-Star game normally is. But, the NBA wants to have it. And you got to respect each player's in situations like this, similar to the bubble situation. Guys are putting their health and their family, obviously, concerns at the forefront. But I trust the NBA that if they're going to make this happen, that it's going to be as safe as it possibly can.
Yeah, I don't worry that these guys will be at risk. And certainly, Brian, the point that if the players who are not at the All-Star game go and really break some of the protocol and go mix with a bunch of people that are not just their immediate family members and go to and fro, that is more of a risk. The only reason the All-Star game is so much more of a question is you are mixing guys from 20 or so different teams, right? So if there is one person that could go and sort of go through the whole league. But the hope is that doesn't happen, right? They're going to be very careful. And look, all fingers crossed. Maybe it's going to be fantastic. I love All-Star every year. I hope they use the Elon scoring ending that they used last year. Seeing all those guys together will certainly give everyone that feeling of just sort of fun and what the NBA is about. I do have to ask, Matt, if you are a player and you were sent to the All-Star game in Atlanta and you were told you had to spend the entire weekend just in your hotel room without being allowed to leave except to go to practice or the court, how tempting will it be for any of these guys to, not sample Atlanta?
That's
I'm
tough.
just going to put it that way, Matt.
That's tough. I mean, the fact that it's Atlanta on top of that,
yeah.
And Atlanta acts like COVID doesn't exist. They've never shut down. Everything has continued to go. Steven Jackson lives out there. We talk constantly about how just Atlanta has been a free-for-all. So it's going to be a tough situation. Like I said, normally you let your hair down, you have a good time at events on and off the court during All-Star. This is just going to be at All-Star. But obviously I think guys that aren't going to All-Star are going to be at more at a risk because they've kind of been contained to these certain restrictions and they have 5 or 6 days off and there's no telling what they're going to do and where they're going to go.
I'm very interested to hear what the rules are going to be for the players who are not going to Atlanta, right? Are they allowed to go to Mexico? Are they allowed to, right, the rules?
Rules.
And then also the rules for the guys in Atlanta. Do they have to stay in their hotel? Are they allowed to have guests? Who are the guests? Anyway, we'll discuss all that later. We will also discuss the All-Star voting later in the show because there's really interesting names and numbers going on there. Let's move on, Brian. Where in the world are you now?
Las Vegas, Nevada, where
look at that.
A player or two might come during their All-Star break if they don't go to Atlanta. The strange thing about this summer, Rachel, is there's going to be two things happening at the exact same time, which is preparation for the Olympics and the NBA Finals. And so it's already becoming an issue because the Tokyo Olympics look like they're going to happen. And how do you do both if you're USA Basketball? So USA Basketball is planning on creating a bubble. That's exactly, I'm sure everybody wants to hear, another bubble for not only members of Team USA, but also the teams from Australia, Spain, and maybe even Argentina. They're going to be represented by a bunch of NBA players as well. They want to have it here in Las Vegas where they can practice and play games against each other before safely, hopefully COVID-free and with vaccines is the idea, fly to Tokyo and compete in the Olympics. The crazy thing, guys, is that the Team USA's first game in the Olympics is scheduled for 3 days after a possible Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So Jerry Colangelo and USA Basketball want to be able to ask the Olympic Committee for them to change the rosters in the middle of the Olympics so that somebody who potentially could have played in the finals or the conference finals who gotten some rest can come over and join the team. Typically, it's a couple of weeks before you have to set your roster, but everything is different. I don't know if this is going to get approved, but that's their plan, and it's going to be based in the run-up here in Las Vegas.
Well, that's really interesting because if they could change the roster halfway through and, you know, the qualifying games, the original round-robin games aren't as hard for Team USA to win, that would be interesting, Matt. Do you think it's realistic to expect NBA players, especially on Team USA, to participate in these Olympic Games? Talk about the dates there. I mean, it's crazy.
I think so. I think so. Although the schedule's compact, this is just, we're in different times now, so we're in trial and error and trying to make things go on the fly. But if anything, what I would want to see is really them kind of transition right to it. Because if they took a few weeks off or 3 or 4 weeks off after the finals and you kind of shut your body down, then you try to get your engine restarted, it might be a problem. So, I don't expect guys like LeBron, if he's going to play probably early in the games. But I think at some point when it starts getting more serious, he'll play. But like I said, they're doing something on the fly. This is the Olympics. This is what all the guys are waiting for. So I'm sure we'll have a stacked roster.
Will be very interesting, and especially also players who are not Americans who are playing for their country is so much of a rite of passage of their basketball experience, what they're going to want to do as well. All right, let's move on, Brian. I feel like maybe you're in a place very dear and special to me. Is that possible?
Yes, I am. You've been to, I believe, our nation's capital once or twice, Rachel.
Yes.
I think you stood right here at the Lincoln Memorial, probably on a high school field trip or two.
Yep.
And last night, the team that calls Washington home, the Wizards, got one of the biggest wins of the season when they went down to Miami, playing a very healthy Miami Heat team. They didn't get in until 4 a.m. on their travel, had to get up for COVID testing like 4 or 5 hours later and stun the healthy Heat. And so 2 big wins in the last week for the Wizards has calmed down any rumblings around Bradley Beal. Let me just say that in talking to people in Beal's camp, in talking to executives out there, even though it looked really bad and it still may again look bad when the Wizards struggle a little bit, there's never been any wavering that Bradley Beal was on the market. Now, whether or not executives believe that will stay that way through March 25th is a different question, but the Wizards are playing better, and Bradley Beal was never on the market if you listen to what everybody is saying.
All right, well, Matt, how much should we read into, watch this, all the smoke around Beal and the Wizards?
Winning helps everything, but to be honest with you, they're 3-7 in their last 10 games. But the one thing I respect about Bradley Beal is regardless of what's going on, he's going to say and do the right thing on and off the court. Now, whether he's really on the trade market or not, I guess we won't know until that trade line comes and goes. But the one thing about Bradley Beal is he's a consummate pro. He's going to give his absolute most effort. And he's someone you definitely want in your locker room.
Well, Brian, look, we always point out to fans and viewers watching this show, this isn't us picking at Bradley Beal. Is he going to stay or go? This is because you legitimately, Brian, talked to dozens of front office people who are asking you, in a lot of cases, how available is Beal? What's going on with Beal? We're talking about Beal. If the hubbub around Beal is simmering down, who is the next person that you hear front office is talking about?
Well, Ben Simmons was offered for James Harden, so there's a question about whether if a star becomes available, whether he could be. And another guy that executives are watching out there because they're not sure of his future with the organization is Zach LaVine. Now, I would tell you that the Bulls, if they're going to trade a guy like Zach LaVine, who's having a career season, would want to trade him for someone like Bradley Beal. So I think it's not necessarily an either or. I think it would be if a player like Bradley Beal is available, that would get, Philly or Chicago interested. But if you're looking for players who possibly could be out there